All right. Well, thank you all for your patience as we get started here. I want to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Dion Thompson-Davley. I'm a program manager with NATO. And this afternoon, I'm pleased to be joined by my co-host, Dr. Joanie Buckley. Dr. Buckley is an enrolled member of the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin, and she's an expert on tribal and regional economic development. She has served as a division director for Oneida Nation, as well as a director for economic development at the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe in Colorado. Today, Dr. Buckley teaches in the School of Business at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, and she is a collaborator for the First Nations Development Institute. The structure of this webinar this morning, we're going to go ahead and go through some introductory material, and then I'll have some comments from EDA and from Joanie, and then we'll go ahead and get to our panel conversation. So just a little housekeeping as we get going. This session is being recorded. We'll be happy to share both these slides and the recording of the webinar at the conclusion. We'll send that out by email, and it'll also be available on the NATO website. This session is being offered through the Economic Development Administration's Economic Development District Community of Practice, which is a 5-year EDA-funded effort to deliver resources, technical assistance, and peer engagement opportunities to the community of more than 400 economic development districts across the country. And as some disclaimer language, the statements, findings, conclusions, and recommendations shown here today are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Economic Development Administration or the U.S. Department of Commerce. The EDD Community of Practice is led by NATO, as well as our 3 partner organizations. That's the First Nations Development Institute, the University Economic Development Association, and the National Association of Regional Councils. And we've structured the Community of Practice into 5 different program areas. These are EDD Essentials, Resilient and Equitable Regions, Wealth Creation Strategies, our virtual portal, and research, partnerships, and technical assistance. You can learn more about each of these program areas on our website, nato.org/EDD-CoP. And you can also subscribe to our email newsletter that goes out once a week with all the updates about newly published resources, webinars, and events through the COP. That's at nato.org/subscribe. As we mentioned at the top, this session is being delivered with our partners at the First Nations Development Institute. This year, we'll be delivering together a series of resources that are aimed at better developing linkages between economic development districts and tribal nations that overlap geographically. This session, of course, is a part of that. I also want to highlight the tip sheet that we released several weeks ago, which contains our initial findings from research that we've done on this topic, as well as some engagement that we have done with the EDD community. As a short preview, the extent of relationships between economic development districts and tribal governments across the country varies very widely, but there's broad recognition that tribal nations are critical partners in regional economic development, and that comprehensive and culturally respectful engagement can contribute to better integrated development planning. As the map on the left shows here, there are more than 150 economic development districts whose borders in some way overlap with tribal reservations or off-reservation trust lands, and those are all across the country, representing almost half of all economic development districts. So this is a topic with broad application, no matter what region in the country that you're in, and we're excited to be delivering these resources and opportunities for engagement this year. Before we introduce the panel, I'm going to go ahead and ask our EDA partners to speak to us for a few minutes. So now I'm pleased to welcome Carolee Wenderoth, the Tribal Engagement Coordinator at EDA. Carolee is EDA's first ever Tribal Engagement Coordinator, and in her role, she works to build and expand relationships among all levels of government with American Indians, Indian tribes, Alaska Natives, and other Native communities, as well as national, state, and regional economic development corporations. Carolee is a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, where she previously was the department head of the Tribal Lands Department. Carolee, are you able to hear us?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Kisub Kukiet Hesquext and Carolee Thuisquest. As mentioned before, my name is Carolee Wenderoth. I'm so honored to be here with you today. I do represent EDA as the Tribal Engagement Coordinator and absolutely love the idea of this community of practice for many reasons. The Economic Development District's work to encourage economic planning and project implementation is critical to EDA's mission, as we all know, of leading the federal economic agenda by promoting innovation and competitiveness, preparing American regions for growth and success in the worldwide economy. I am excited about this conversation today because many tribal nations are the economic engines for their communities and their regions, yet few tribal nations and EDDs have history of collaboration, oftentimes sharing landscapes and similar economic priorities or goals. Tribal engagement, though, promotes building trust, strengthening relationships, and offers technical assistance opportunities to capacity-strained areas that but for EDDs may not exist. This becomes critical for all tribal nations in looking at how to advance their economic development goals. Many tribes have long been planning, and they have been doing great work to build robust economies, but they've done so in a separate lane from most EDDs. The collaboration among tribes and EDDs can maximize use of resources and more efficiently execute on shared interests in ways that for a long time, for a number of reasons, it didn't exist. But bringing all of these conversations to the table the way that this community of practice is done has opened so many eyes into the different ways that we can build on these relationships and find ways to offer more collaboration. I'm extremely delighted about the work that this particular community of practice has done and appreciate the Tribal Engagement 101 document that was just highlighted a few slides ago. Great strides in building and maintaining relationships with Indigenous communities. And I do look forward to the engagement of First Nations Development Institute as a partner in this community of practice to further advance the effort to bridge the work of tribal nations and our economic development districts as they pursue economic development. Again, I am honored to be with you today and look forward to the discussion today.
Carolee, thank you so much for those comments, and we're very fortunate to have your support and EDA support as we continue to engage on this project. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my co-host, Dr. Joanie Buckley, who's going to make some comments about First Nations, and then we'll introduce our panel.
Great. Thank you so much, Dion, and seguli to everyone. Hello. I just want to kind of give a brief overview of First Nations. First Nations Development Institute is a highly rated American Indian nonprofit. Since the beginning of their grant-making program in 1993. Their mission is really to uplift and sustain the lifeways and economies of Native communities through advocacy, financial support, and knowledge sharing. It's very important to know that it's not just about giving money, it's about sharing the knowledge too, and really supporting them. So you can see on this slide the various programs that they do. Those are their anchored programs on it. And what it does is it continues to focus on Native strengths and life's ways. They kind of envision a world where tribal sovereignty is upheld and Native ingenuity and knowledge is honored and respected. So I am so honored to be associated with this great nonprofit working on grassroots initiatives in Indian country. I'm also delighted to introduce our speakers today. And so I'm going to start with ladies first, with Kristin, and start from Alaska. and kind of move over to Washington State and then on to Michigan. So Kristin Smith is an executive director of the Prince William Sound Economic Development District. She brings over 2 decades of nonprofit management experience to her role. A resident of Cordova, Alaska for decades, Kristin's career has been dedicated to regional development and environmental stewardship. She previously managed the Copper River Watershed Project for many years, focusing on salmon habitat restoration and watershed education. In her current position at the Prince William Sound Economic Development District, Kristin works to build regional partnerships to improve ferry service, catalyze investment in mariculture, and advance priority economic development projects in the Prince William Sound communities. She's an avid birder and outdoor enthusiast. So Kristin's passion for the area's natural beauty was sparked by a summer vacation in Alaska, working on trail projects. She holds a Master's of Public Policy degree with Harvard University and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from Middlebury College. So welcome, Kristin, to us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yes, and I'm going to introduce all of our speakers first, and then we'll start with some Q&A. But welcome, Kristin, and I'm glad that you were able to join us. Then we're going to kind of move over to the state of Washington. And if I fly into Spokane and take a car and drive up a couple of hours to the northeast, I should find Frank Metlow, who's the Deputy Executive Director and Planning Director of the Tri-County Economic Development District. He brings over a decade of experience in tribal and regional planning to his role. It's also great to know that he's an enrolled member of the Spokane Tribe of Indians. And Frank previously served as the Spokane Tribe's Planning Department for 10 years, including 5 of the plan as a planning director. During this time, he also served on the TED, as they call it, Board of Directors, bringing tribal and regional planning efforts. In his current position at TED, which he has held for the past 3 years, Frank leverages his unique background to foster economic growth and collaboration across diverse communities. And Frank, thank you so much for making time to join us and share your knowledge. And then as we move over a little bit more, we're going to end up in Michigan, in the North Point there, almost so close to Canada. So Jeff Hagan is the CEO of the Eastern Upper Peninsula Regional Planning and Development Commission. He's been with the commission since 2000, serving as the CEO since 2007. Jeff supervises all of the projects and programs carried out by staff, development of annual work plan, budget preparation, and serves on various local, regional, and other bodies, providing information and supervises the staff. He is currently serving on the Chippewa County Economic Development Corporation's Board of Directors, the UP Economic Development Alliance Board, the National Association of Development Organizers Board of Directors, and the City of Sault Ste. Marie Local Development Finance Authority, the headquarters north of Executive Committee, and the Sioux Town Planning Commission. So he is all over that economic development landscape. He holds a BS in land use planning and area management from Lake Superior State University. And we want to welcome you, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us. So with the 3 speakers, what I'm going to do is start our conversation. And this conversation is really about talking about strategies that have been implemented or that you're looking at really to bridge that community gap with tribal governments or tribal communities and the economic development initiatives that you have on site. As I ask each one, I'll ask each one of you the same question. And I'm going to start from left to right again with Kristin so that you can kind of understand where the landscape is. And if you would also, speakers, mention a little bit about your location and how you're interacting so that people have a geographic reference, it'd be great. So let me start out with the first question and say, starting with Kristin, how did your EDD first establish partnerships with local tribal nations? What were the initial challenges and how did you overcome this? Kristin?
Sure, thank you. Good morning. So I would like to start by just acknowledging that I work and reside on the unceded territories of the Eyak people in our region. We're coastal neighbors to the Prince William Sound Sukpiak and the Yakutak Tlingit in this region. And our bylaws for the EDD, the way they set up the board, say that we have to have membership representation from the 3 municipalities and the 2 tribal villages in our region. And then so that's 5 seats on our board. And then we have 4 at-large seats. And so among those, we have board members from the native village of Chiniga, the village of Tititlik, the Tititlik Corporation, and then also the regional Chugach Alaska Corporation. And this might be the time to ask Dion to share the screen and show that graphic that I sent. Alaska's a little bit different because because of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, a lot of land was conveyed to tribal corporate entities. And so we have 3, this kind of makes it look like 4. I was going to say 3 to 4 types of tribal entities in our state. So we are, anyway, it's kind of, we do still have to make an effort, but it's very much part of the local dynamic, part of the community and regional fabric of having all these tribal entities as potential partners. Excuse me. So what this is showing, the regional corporations are the biggest entities. They are native private landowners and they own subsurface rights to the land that they hold. And we have 13 regional native corporations. And so in our region, we're in South Central Alaska, down in the very crook where it says Chugach. So kind of, I can't do it very well backwards. This is your map of Alaska. Actually, maybe it should be this way for you. Anyway, this area here is where we are, South Central Alaska. So we work with the Chugach Alaska Corporation as our regional native corporation. We work with 3 village corporations, the Chiniga Corporation, the Tititlik Corporation, and the Eyak Corporation are all landowners in our region. And then there are the native tribal councils. So in terms of how do we reach out, we have some of them on our board, but it's still very much a matter of relationship building. We are constantly reaching out and saying, what are your priorities? What kinds of things are you working on right now? How can we support you? And so over time, we've built some relationships with folks in each of these places, and we've learned about some of their energy priorities, their housing priorities, and they've asked, in some cases, they ask for help with their grant applications and we write letters of support. In some cases, we're more involved, like we are a partner on one application that was just submitted with the Chiniga Corporation, where we are a community-based nonprofit partner on the application. So it varies, but I think it's just all about cultivating a relationship and making sure that it's very much a 2-way conversation. When you have meetings and you want to get public input, it's not about saying, I mean, we try really hard not to set up meetings where we're saying, here's a microphone, say your 3-minute testimony, thank you very much, we're done. You know, it's much more about a two-way exchange here, learning about their priorities. And I think when we have something that we want to be a partner on and we're asking for support, we make a point of going to their meetings. Like, can I get on your tribal council agenda and make sure that we're speaking to the tribal council and we're not asking them to take time out of their schedule to come to a meeting that we've set up, but we're going to their meetings, I think is a really important step.
Thank you so much. I think that that's a good presentation on what you're doing. And so what we gathered from that is having the board members allows you to also have formal and informal interactions with them on there. So I'm going to go on to Frank and ask you the same question. You want me to repeat it here? Your EDD, how is it, how did your EDD establish partnerships with local tribal nations, and what were your challenges?
So just like Kristin said, we have our board that we have for our EDD. We also have seats. All 3 tribes in our region have seats. Where we're located is we're located in Northeast Washington. Right in the very northeast corner, we're bordered by Canada to the north and Idaho to the east. And we have 3 tribes in our region. We have the Spokane tribe, we have the Colville Confederated tribes, and we have the Kalispel tribe. And like you said in my introduction, I'm a member of the Spokane tribe. I was their planning director for 5 years and served on their planning staff for 10. And prior to that, I was in the Navy for 20 years. So that was quite a change. The way that so when I first started in the planning department at the Spokane tribe, from day one, I was invited to be on the board here at the Tri-County Economic Development District. So I was the tribe's board representative here on the Tri-County Economic Development District Board of Directors. We engaged very regularly with our tribal partners. We do an annual, so we don't want like to have a bunch of representatives, whether they're tribal or non-tribal, that you know, that we lose contact with or anything like that. So we do an annual board membership designation. So it keeps those lists updated and who our point of contacts are for all of our board members, and that allows us to keep real-time contact information with all of our tribal representatives. We have our technical advisory committee that we run for, because we carry we wear several hats here. We are the EDD, the Economic Development District. We're also the Regional Transportation Planning Organization, also the Associated Development Organization for the state of Washington for our region. And we run a nonprofit called the Tri-County Economic Development Corporation. We have a staff of 8. Of our staff of 8, 2 of us are tribal members. Myself with the Spokane tribe, and one of our other staff who is a member of the Colville Confederated tribes. So we have good, not just representation on our board, but we have you know, a quarter of our staff here are tribal members as well. So it really helps having tribal members on staff when it comes to just knowing how to, like you talked about earlier, knowing how to engage with tribes, how to be culturally respectful when you engage with tribes, you know, and just understanding. And also it helps to have the network, you know. It helps to have someone who knows who the tribal leaders are, and you know, like my cousin's on the council, so it's very easy for me to get a hold of the Spokane Tribes Council and have interaction with them. We sit on several committees with the tribe, and they sit on ours. They are a member of our SEDS committee when we do our comprehensive economic development strategy. They have a seat there. We make sure that all the tribes are represented there. And the Spokane tribe just recently updated their SEDS. And, you know, what we find is when we do that, that is reciprocated back where we were invited to be on their SEDS committee. So it really helps. We were able to take the regional SEDS and then the SEDS with the tribe and kind of coordinate on those and make sure that they're complementary and supportive. And you have plans that are truly regional. And I'm trying to think what else. What was the other part of the question?
No, that's fine. What are the initial challenges and how do you overcome them?
Some of the challenges. So the Spokane tribe and the Colville tribe they've been pretty steady, but the Kalispell tribe, you know, is hit and miss. So getting the tribes, we always make sure that everything we do, that the tribes always have the opportunity to participate. Sometimes they choose not to. But we always make sure we give them the opportunity. We will never not engage with the tribes because they haven't engaged with us. So we will always make sure that we give the opportunity to engage and make sure they have the choice to participate in whatever it is we're doing, whether we're writing a plan, updating a plan, or, you know, whatever it is that our organization's doing. We always make sure the tribes are involved.
Great. Thank you so much, Frank. And now I'm going to kind of move over to Michigan with Jeff.
Sure. Thanks, Joanie. So our organization's been in existence since 1968. We're located in the far eastern end of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Our service area covers 3 counties, 36 local units of government, so township, cities, and villages, and then the 2 tribal nations, the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians and the Bay Mills Indian Community. Presently, we have a staff of 7 looking to expand, but like everyone else, you know how hard it is to recruit people. So talking a little bit about the 2 tribal nations in our district, for as long as I can remember, and I've been here 24 years, the tribes have maintained 1 board level seat on our governing board under the representative of minority groups category in our bylaws, primarily because between both of the tribes, they account for over 25% of the region's population. And both tribes are represented on our SEDS committee. In Michigan, it might be situated a little bit differently, but there's also an economic development district with the Intertribal Council that provides services to all tribes in Michigan. But they also participate in our SEDS process, and they're both pretty active there. So I would say that UP Regional Planning became more heavily involved with the tribes through our state scenic byways program. And some federal highway grants that we got to market and promote and tell stories along M123, which is the Tequamanon Scenic Byway, runs right through Bay Mills Indian Community territory and historically areas that were important to the Sioux tribe. I would say the main challenges that we encountered was just the basic inability to connect with the right staff person in order to discuss projects, try to understand what was important to them, be culturally respectful. We might get bounced around. Sometimes we were talking to someone in the cultural department. Sometimes it was literally an administrative assistant. And in some cases, the tribe was unhappy with us because they felt like we weren't consulting with them enough. But I would say in our defense, we were making every effort we could to reach out to try and figure out who we were supposed to be talking to. And that constantly was changing, and or the name we were given, like we're emailing to an email for a person that doesn't even work there anymore, but the email was never shut down. So like, how would we even know that, you know, we just felt like we were presenting every opportunity. If they were involved, they were involved, but we had no way of really knowing. But my disclaimer is that my wife is a Sioux tribe member. She also works with the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians. She's been there for a very long time. So for me, it provides a unique opportunity to try and like pick her brain and figure out like, hey, who's working on what? Like who's working on transportation? What's the contact info? And that's been extremely helpful, but not everyone has a person like that they can go to. So I think it's a daunting task sometimes if you don't have that pre-existing relationship. But I think that You just have to keep at it and just try to get to the right person. That's gonna be the person that's gonna be your contact on whatever project you're working on.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So I'm going to kind of synthesize a couple of things because you mainly have people on your board or on your SEDS committee that are tribal members or tribal representatives. There's a lot of EDDs out there that may not have that same setup. If they have not been able to engage, like Jeff, you just said, sometimes it's hard to get to the right person. I'm going to ask a rapid fire to each of the three of you. If you cannot seem to get into the tribe to get the right person, what is the strategy that you would use for that? Kristin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure other than like what Jeff said, to keep trying, you know, it is tough because we've experienced that too, you know, there's turnover. Sometimes you build a relationship with one person, they've been there for 1.5 years or 2 years, and then a new person comes in and you have to start over. And, but I don't have a magic formula. You just keep working on the relationship and cultivating support and understanding with the next person to the best that you can. Yeah.
Frank?
So I would say just make sure you keep your contact information updated for one, but don't be afraid to engage at the tribal council level. A lot of that decision making is at the tribal council level. And usually when you engage at that level, you get sent to the right person. The tribal council knows who their economic development folks are. They're meeting with them on a regular basis. And it also helps too, because they know everything that's happening in the tribe. So they know whatever the specific thing you're trying to engage on, whether it should be on maybe the economic development or the tribal enterprises side of the house, or maybe it's a DNR issue, or maybe it's a, you need to coordinate on an environmental review for a project and get comments. They know where to send you. And
Okay.
that would be my advice.
Thank you. And Jeff, you did very well on that, but if you want to just follow up, it's
Yeah,
okay.
I would say a couple things. Personal relationships, if you have them, use them to your advantage. The second one is like with the Sioux tribe, they're a very large tribe. They're the largest tribe in Michigan. They have an executive director. Work your channel through the executive director. The other tribe in our region doesn't have an executive director, so we would work with council, like Frank mentioned.
Okay, thank you so much. So there's a couple of avenues there. Is you could formalize something with the council then and be on an agenda to talk about the EDD and some of the initiatives around there. If you were going to do it formal, you can be informal with a council member, as you said, or the executive director, or you can go in through a department on a project you guys are working, correct? Okay, so let me ask you another question then. I'd like you just to describe briefly before I ask you this question, let me mention that if anybody in the audience wants to ask questions, please throw those in chat, because then Dion can bring them up when we are discussing things. So on this second question, can you describe a successful project where your EDD collaborated with tribal nations? What was it and what made it particularly impactful? Because that's what builds relationships. So I'll start with Kristin again, please.
Sure, thank you. I think the one that comes to mind for me is we have been working on a shared seafood/food processing facility, trying to get something going in Cordova. And I approached the council and they chipped in some funding on the initial feasibility study, because I had heard through some informal conversations that they were also interested in some kind of a subsistence food processing facility. And I thought, great, maybe we can be partners. Maybe that's something that they would benefit from also. So they did contribute. We haven't got it construction funding yet, but we're in the process of developing a business plan, and they've been participating in every phase of this project. And I think that's the main thing is, yes, they contributed funding, and again, there's been some staff turnover, but I've been trying to make sure that whether it's their construction person or their subsistence food coordinator, that there's somebody participating in our planning meetings. And I think that's been pretty successful so far. They seem they're interested. I mean, there's a lot of issues to be worked out with, for processing salmon, and then they want to come in and somebody wants to process a deer. Obviously, you have to make sure there's not cross-contamination, and we have to talk about how the facility is going to be managed and work out some pretty key details. But they are interested, and yeah, I think it's really contributed to support for the project.
Thank you. That's a wonderful project to showcase a win-win there. Frank?
For us, it was in the area of broadband.
Okay.
During COVID, because we are very rural, sometimes even considered frontier here up in Northeast Washington. And through the EDD and a partnership with the Spokane Tribe of Indians and Washington State University Extensions Program, we formed the first broadband action team. And our broadband action, through that, what we were able to do is we were able to form partnerships and collaborations that would not have happened without it. So we were able to form that regional partnership, and we were able to finally, because at the Spokane Tribe, we struggled and struggled and struggled trying to start our telecom and trying to get broadband to our reservation. And then finally, once we started this collaboration, and then we started networking, and we met a company that had, it was a wholesale telecom company. And what they did, we ended up partnering with them. So the tribe got some ARPA funds, and our priority was, nobody was in school, people needed to go to clinics, and no one had internet. So we deployed $7 million worth of broadband infrastructure across the reservation to make that possible. And we did that. We didn't have telecom engineers, but through our coordination through the broadband action team, we were able to partner with a company that did have those engineers that we could contract with and fill that technical gap that we didn't have. That was our barrier to success. And we were able to deploy our initial $7 million build out. And in the past 2 years, the tribe has received $36 million in grants to do fiber to the home on the reservation, and to do digital equity projects, and to get all the homes connected, and to get training for the folks on the reservation. To the biggest complaint we had was every school in the state is going to this online portal way of monitoring how your children are doing, and none of the parents even knew how to use this portal. And then so it was just a really good project, and it really filled that technical gap of getting connected and giving them access to the online economy, telemedicine, telehealth, and distance learning. So it really filled that gap. That was a project that I can think of that I'm pretty proud of, that we took part in.
That's an excellent example, because you brought in some of the other team members. And I've been in a place with the last mile where you don't have access to anything. Jeff, tell us your story there.
Sure. So in 2019, we started working with the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians on a public works grant application to EDA. They wanted to construct a new industrial building. The whole emphasis for it was geared towards diversifying the tribe's economic development efforts. We had a number of funding challenges because the grant was applied for in 2019, awarded in early 2020, went to go build the building in 2021. And as we all know, the world changed significantly in 2 years. So with the rising cost of labor, materials were unreal. It took us a couple of years to get the project off the ground. But what made that successful is that the economic development director that was there at the time used to work at a regional planning commission in the UP, was an economic development district director. So he was familiar with like the role that we played with EDA and how we could help them on their projects. So that fostered into us being the grant administrator of their project, and the building was successfully built. It was implemented. I believe they've got 2 tenants in there right now, and they're looking to seek a third one for the third space that they have in the building. It's a 20,000 square foot building, if I didn't mention that before, but that was pretty impactful at that time. I'm gonna save some of my Bay Mills examples for later questions because they haven't been implemented yet, but there's been a lot going on with EDA in our region, and this was one of the first projects that EDA funded in quite some time.
Thank you so much. I think that's great. And it's great that you've got 3 different projects that really show how you're aligning with the different tribes. But on that same side, I'm going to come from the other direction and say, what unique perspectives or approaches have tribal partners brought to the Economic Development Initiative? Unique perspectives or unique approaches?
And before we get to that question, actually, Joanie, would you mind
Okay.
if Carolee interjects with a follow-up?
Not at all. Please, Carolee.
I thank you, and I'm sorry for barging into the conversation, but before we get too far away from questions 1 and 2, I wanted to add just a little bit from a different lens about that engagement and building those relationships, and just like a unique perspective, which I think becomes crucial and kind of is low-hanging fruit as to the portion of communication and engagement, and that's the historical way that program planning dollars have been delivered as a service through EDA, and recognizing that tribes do have their own pot of funding for program planning. So a lot of tribes are not engaging with EDDs actively, because they don't need to, because they feel like they have their own planning dollars. That's just an organic way, I believe, of having that siloed activity, because they don't recognize that need in that collaboration because they feel they have the funding to do it on their own. So moving forward, I do feel like the more that tribes do find out about EDDs and that the added value they can bring to the table, even though they do have their own pot of funding, that there is value add to that collaboration. Those are the conversations and the pillars or the silos, I think, that need to be removed, and understanding that just because there are separate pots of funding doesn't mean that there can't be collaboration. Some tribes don't pursue that EDD collaboration because they just, for the longest time, have felt like they've had the money to do so or the funding to do so on their own. So I just wanted to bring that to the forefront as another way of engaging, especially for those areas that historically have not had a lot of collaboration. And it might not be for any other reason other than they just didn't realize that that value does exist and that they can work together even if they're being funded separately.
Thank you, Carolee. That's wonderful, the way that you pose that. And so it puts something in the back of our minds to really understand their situation on it. And I think the interesting thing here is with these 3 projects, you found something where you could collaborate with the tribes and make it better and bigger that would help the region. So just know, for those of you who are having that little wall in between, that there's reasons behind it, and you need to find something where both can benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me interject.
Yes, anytime, please. Okay, and so other than the projects you guys mentioned, is there a unique perspective or approach where the tribe has come to you and brought some economic development initiatives to your region? Or have you heard of some needs from them informally? So we'll start with Kristin again, please.
So the one that comes to mind for me first is not actually from our region, but we learned about it, and I have been trying to coordinate a presentation from the Kuskokwim Corporation there on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta region, so Western Alaska. But the corporation there has initiated a program that they call Harvest to Home, and they worked with HUD to develop a HUD-approved home design that is more like a traditional Alaska log cabin, but with a
Mhm.
log cabin exterior and then some blue foam board insulation in between that, I think, and the drywall on the inside to better insulate. But they went to HUD and got this design approved as a HUD-approved home design, and they are harvesting some of their own trees and milling them to make these log cabin kits for homes in their region, which I just thought was genius all the way around.
Yes.
So they're using their local resources, so they're not having to ship. They're employing people, doing some workforce development in terms of getting folks trained in the mill and the kit and the log home kit production, and providing this really critical resource that housing is an issue everywhere. So anyway, I just thought that was such a good initiative in so many ways, and something that could possibly be applied in other regions. That's why I wanted to come to our board, because we certainly have timber resources in the Chugach region. So
Thank you so much.
mhm.
Frank?
So one of the main economies here is tourism. And what we do a lot with the tribes, because we're kind of, I don't know, we have these small rural counties, but we have these little gems scattered all over the place. And an important part of that, like I'll say for like the city of Chewelah, for example, it's a small town of like 2,000 people in Stevens County, Washington. And it sits right at the base of a mountain that has one of the best ski resorts in Washington State up at the top of it. And you go 3 miles south, and the Spokane tribe just put in a brand new, they have a casino there that is now the Mistaqua Casino Hotel, where they put in a brand new 70-room hotel that's the nicest hotel in our region. And they have been great about coordinating tourism opportunities, because lodging, we other than a few mom and pop motels scattered throughout these small towns in our region, we don't really have lodging, and lodging is super important to tourism. And so we have a marketing person here who works with the marketing person at the tribes, and it's the same thing up in the town of Cusick, where the Kalispel tribe is. They have a brand new casino that they built up there. That these are very important to have this cross collaboration with these, like you have stay and play packages. You have them sharing customer data and things like that. That people who don't do the enterprise side of business don't really think about, but that is vital information to any business. And then when it helps the local small business owners are able to coordinate with a casino or a resort in the region, and then you have huge employers like the ski resort at 49 Degrees North. They're now in the collaboration with it. So you get all of this sharing and all of this cross collaboration, and it just really has really, it's gonna, I don't want to sound weird, but it's like this little town in Eastern Washington is gonna be like the next Vail. And we're seeing it. Now we're seeing this huge influx of middle to high income people who are buying. The problem is they're buying up all the homes, but they're bringing this income into the region that wasn't there before. But now that we have this collaboration between the tribes and between the small towns and the businesses, it's just become this really good formula. And now we have destination marketing groups popping up in all the small communities that the tribes are right there in the middle of. So
Excellent. Thank you so much, Frank. And let's hear from Jeff.
Sure. I think a big one for us as far as the Economic Development District is that in the EDA worldview, tribes are treated quite differently in terms of applying for grants, matching funds, you know, that type of thing. So it's really presented a tremendous opportunity for the tribes, one that I don't think they really took real big advantage of in the past. But I would say since 2020, it's been pretty crazy in terms of the project proposals that we've seen come through. Not all of them were funded by EDA, some were funded by other sources like the Department of Energy, et cetera. But I mean, really, kudos to them for being ready, for having project plans, for sharing those with us so that we can help support them in their efforts. And I think it's been a really beneficial relationship both ways in terms of how can the Economic Development District support them? How can we help assist them with their EDA efforts? Because it's a benefit to the whole region when the tribes are successful, when the tribes are strong. So, and I think just the type of projects that both tribes are interested in. Bay Mills Indian Community went through an EDA strategic planning grant, really geared towards trying to diversify their economy, and they're implementing that plan. So it's just been great to see.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. And I'm sure that it's great because you've got this relationship. But I'm going to go back to some EDDs that may not have the relationship. So I want us to think about the strategies in that. But how do you ensure as an EDD that the tribal interest and cultural considerations are respected when you're starting to incorporate joint projects? Because that's the big one for us as tribal members, is to make sure that you understand the tribal interest in the culture, because it's about building a community. So I'll start with Kristin again.
That's a great question, and I think it's kind of fits in with this whole idea of community of practice. I mean, it's something we have to keep listening, keep engaging, keep talking about what are your priorities, how can we help, what are, you know, here's what we're working on, does that fit at all with yours, or do you know, are we want to make sure we're not stepping on your toes, and but yeah, I think it's just a constant relationship building. I mean, I think about the village of Chiniga has been interested in getting into mariculture, which is seaweed or shellfish farming, are the two main things. And Chiniga is interested in getting into oyster farming, which is great because I have a friend who's an oyster farmer and she can't grow enough oysters. You know, the markets will take everything she can grow, so we could use more growers. But we've been supporting them, and again, mostly through letters of support and making sure that they know about funding opportunities and making sure that they know about meetings, or asking, you know, if you are interested in pursuing a permit, how can we help with that process? So just, yeah, offering assistance as much as we can, or offering to connect them with resources.
Oh, that's a very good one, connecting them. Thank you. Frank?
So ours is a lot of the same, where, you know, often our support is just through letters of support and things like that. But, you know, one thing is I feel like we've been kind of lucky in our region because we've had pretty good communication and participation in both directions with our tribes, us with them and them with us. It's been pretty good. And we always make sure that, like I said before, we always include tribes on everything we do. We consider them vital regional partners. And a lot of the time, like, you know, they're the top employers for the region. So it's very important to make sure that when you do projects, no matter if it's economic development, transportation, whatever those projects are, you always coordinate with the tribes. And, you know, it's never even a question that comes up is, do we engage with the tribes, or do we engage with that tribe or that tribe? We always engage with the tribes. It's, you know, they're right there with us in everything we do, and us with them.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Frank, and Jeff.
So everything Kristin said, spot on. That's what we do. Frank added to it just a few things to kind of supplement that. It's really about open, collaborative, inclusive conversations, building that relationship. We have bilateral support, so the tribes are supporting us on SEDS initiatives that we include in our planning process. Vice versa, we're always supporting them, and it's really, that's so powerful when you're working on a project to have a real relationship, and you're not just like, okay, well, you ask for a letter of support, they might give you one, they might not, it's just face value. So I think that shines through in our SEDS process, that we are engaged with both tribes in the development of our SEDS, despite the fact that they do a statewide SEDS for the tribes in Michigan through Intertribal. They're still engaged, they still find value in the process that we go through, and they've been successful. So it's been good.
I think that's a good point. And you brought up another one that I just want to touch on before I go to Dion. The SEDS in Michigan, they have an intertribal one, you said, that they did for all of the tribes. Same thing in Wisconsin through the intertribal one. So I think it's important sometimes to see if there's one of those documents out there for EDDs that don't have that connection, that can get it, because that's usually public documents on it. Thank you. Let me jump over to Dion and see if there are any questions on our chat, please.
Yeah, we actually just got a couple questions in the chat, one from Shaq and one from Bob. And I don't know if either of y'all would like to come off mute and ask the question to the panelists yourselves. Please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I can go ahead and ask on your behalf.
I'm happy to come off mute here just real quickly. I was curious about the status of the availability of capital for some of the projects you're speaking of, some of the really interesting business development projects that the tribes are undertaking in conjunction oftentimes with the EDDs. Is finding adequate capital challenging for the tribal nations to be able to move forward with some of these projects? And I'm also curious if if they're working with SSBCI dollars from U.S. Treasury that have been given to many tribal nations throughout the country.
Yeah, great. I don't think that question was directed at any one of our panelists, but if you would like to speak to it, Kristin, I saw you just come off mute if you had a response.
I don't have a specific response. I think it's a great question. I don't hear about tribes taking advantage of the State Small Business Credit Initiative. But again, our dynamics are a little bit different in that we have tribal corporations that have been generating some of their own revenues. So it's not to say they don't need additional funding, but I haven't heard of the Small Business Credit Initiative. I think, I don't think they do that very much.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I think Sioux Tribe's involved in the Small Business Credit Initiative. I haven't heard anything from Bay Mills, and I haven't heard anything in general about issues with access to capital.
Okay, and Frank?
A couple things. So I had the benefit of being a planning director for both the tribe and for our EDD. So I got to see both sides of the fence here, and I can tell you, when I was the planning director for the tribe, I felt like I had a lot more resources to do my planning work than I do here at the Economic Development District. Again, I don't know this SSBCI program. I don't know who's using it, but what I have seen tribes who have ran successful small business programs is they have developed internal capacity to support small businesses. Tribal entrepreneurs are not comfortable going out and borrowing money from non-tribal entities, and they're more comfortable, especially like the Colville tribe. The Colville tribe developed their own CDFI, and they gained the ability to do small business loans. They started a program called Indianpreneurship, where it's a 10-week course where entrepreneurs come in and they have a weekly class where they write sections of a business plan. It's that type of business support is the most valuable business support that I've seen in Indian country as far as helping entrepreneurs take that step. Anybody who's ever started a small business, it's scary. So it really helps the tribal entrepreneurs knowing they have that support inside their tribe to help them.
Mhm.
Do you
One
have
thing
any-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask Frank if he had any links to information about that program, or, even if it was like a newspaper article or something, if you wouldn't mind putting
Yeah,
that in the
let me
chat.
see. It's called the Northwest Native Development Fund, and I will put the link in the chat.
And that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things too to think about in this is every tribe is so unique and so different. I want to make sure that we throw that out there. Some are large, some have the resources, some do not, some are isolated, some are in food deserts. So you have to really look at their environment. And I'm going to kind of stir away from something and ask Laura Marchino, you're on the call, I think, and you had a comment about what's happening down there in Southwest Colorado. Could you unmute?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry to just drop in on you like this. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm echoing, but I know Joanie. She worked in our area many years ago, not too many though. And we have two tribes. We have an extremely wealthy tribe and one that is not as wealthy. And what I've seen is we are seeing a lot of infrastructure dollars coming into our two Colorado tribes. Because of the, just the federal money that's become available, and there are separate pots of money for tribes. Much like the speaker said, we're on their SEDS committee. We collaborate on multiple projects. We're working on a grocery store project. The opioid settlement dollars, they're actually getting some funds, and we're collaborating outside of that in our region. But yeah, I wasn't familiar with that one program, the credit initiative, either. They're struggling with trying to figure out a way to help small businesses launch or more entrepreneurs, which they're not looking to get big. They just want to sell their product or service, is my opinion.
Thank you, Laura. I think that the good thing about this is that we can chat and share information to different things because everything is so very unique. Dion, do you have any more questions out there?
It looks like people have gone back and forth a little bit about a question we had earlier in the chat, but I'll just read it out in case anyone wants to take another pass at it. How do you go about in advocating for the tribes you work with at the state level? In Colorado, often legislation is passed to provide. Oh, sorry, I've got a little computer issue happening here. It's passed to provide to counties and municipalities, but the verbiage can neglect to include tribes.
Thank you. That's a very good comment. Kristin, do you have anything in your region related to that and engaging them with the state,
Well, because tribes are so very much part of our culture, there's no way they could be neglected. But I was just saying that maybe there's a need in Colorado for folks to kind of band together and coordinate some letter writing and some public involvement with the regional legislators, and be going to them and saying, this is not okay, and we need to make sure that you keep including and broadening your scope of engagement to include tribes.
Thank you, Frank.
So, well, we're not shy about when we're in meetings at the state level and making sure that we insist that tribes are engaged. It's part of what we do. It's not even, it's just automatic. So we expect the same anytime the state or any of projects in our region are going to be funded through state and even federal level. You know, we sit down with elected officials, congressional level folks, and we we talk about tribal involvement is like, just like Kristin put it really well. They're so important to our region, and the tribes were here first. So there's that, and we just make sure that they're involved in everything we do. We insist on it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump to Jeff to see if he wants to answer it, and then I see a hand up with Laura, so I'll jump to her. Jeff?
Yep. Yeah, there's really no concern in that regard in Michigan. The tribes are very strong in Michigan, whether it's individually or through the Intertribal Council. They have a strong advocacy in Lansing, so I've never seen that happen.
Okay, and Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to address it because I don't know if it's because Colorado only has 2 tribes, where they're not really a political powerhouse on the state level. But what we see happening is a lot of rules and laws coming into place, like, even post-COVID, about funding and money, but then they miss that critical piece of, oh, you're a tribe, I don't know where you fit in this. We're talking about state agencies or state programs, and oh, you're not a state program, or you're federal, or you're getting your own money. So it feels like we're doing it after the fact and trying to problem solve and fix things rather than proactively engaging them at the table. And I think because our tribes are so small, they're not always at all the tables, because, as you know, there's a lot of state agencies that are, making different decisions. So
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Thank you so much. And also remember that the tribes, as sovereign domestic nations, they have that first relationship with the federal government too. And so the federal government relationship usually is stronger in that sense because of the advocacy and everything. And different states manage differently in it. Sometimes they don't feel that there's an outreach, or sometimes there may be a vehicle to outreach with the state, and it may be through different avenues. It may be through health care, or it may be through an economic development. And also realize that economic development for a tribe may have a different definition, whether it's just revenue generating, but it's really what they're looking for is the health of their community. Is the community healthy? Do they have employment? Do they have education? Do they have jobs there? Are they respected? So back to you, Dion. I don't know how much time we have left on this, but certainly we can open it up for more comments.
Well, I want to go ahead and let Kristin get a response, and I think she has her hand up.
Oh, I put a link to the executive order 13175 in the chat bar, because it sounds like for people who are kind of, when Laura was talking about folks saying like, what are you? Where do you fit in? It's like, well, maybe remind folks that there's a whole list of federally recognized tribes, and there's a policy about government to government relations, and here it is, and this is our standing. And anyway, I just thought that might help in some cases sort of reframe the conversation if it needed that, or give it a little more context for people who might not be fully recognizing the tribe status.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll also point to the tip sheet that NATO and published a few weeks ago, which is available on our website and will be sent as a follow-up to all the participants here today for more information that gets a little bit into that context, which I think is really valuable. We do have a little more time. I'm going to take advantage of it to ask a question that I actually have for the three of you. And that's that I've had the chance to hear from economic development districts, dozens about their relationships with tribes. And one thing that I've heard a couple of times is from districts that have either had relationships in the past with tribal governments in their area that have kind of lapsed, that have fallen apart as people leave, or like there's no alignment on projects over a period of time, or something along those lines, or who have never really considered engaging with the tribes in the region. That is frequently because you'll have like a very small tribal presence. There'll be potentially one reservation that has just a few members, and so it's not something that's been top of mind for that district before. Do you all have any recommendations? All of you have extensive relationships, you've institutionalized them, you can point to specific projects you're working on. Do you have any recommendations for someone who's in a situation where they're like, oh, this is kind of a new subject to me, where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing I would say is just don't be afraid to reach out, even if it's not initially the right person to talk to. Talking to someone and kind of putting that placeholder down, that sharing what you do as an organization. Kristin mentioned it earlier, but sometimes there's an educational misfire there in terms of like, they don't really know what you do. They may have had an assumption. They don't really know a lot about the Economic Development District. So take every chance you can get to try to get information out about your organization and what you do. How can you support their programs and initiatives? And then, of course, eventually finding the right staff person that is the person that you should be working with. Use your network of contacts. Just make yourself available to that organization and support their initiatives is what I found success in.
And I 100% agree with Jeff. Make sure it's just keeping open lines of communication and making sure they're involved, coordinating your plans. But another thing is the EDDs need to realize that, what I'm finding more often than not is the tribe doesn't benefit from us working with them. We benefit from working with the tribe. That's what we find. A lot of the time, the tribe has more resources, has more experienced people in economic development, especially on the enterprise side, that they are often they bring to the table a lot of economic development experience that a lot of us in small rural communities don't possess. The tribes are already doing it. So that's just something I found is we benefit more by having the tribes involved than they benefit from us.
I will say too that one thing, I agree with both of those wholeheartedly. One thing that the EDDs can offer is if you can get a mention, if there's a specific reference in your SEDS to a project that a tribe is interested in, a lot of times that will hint, then you write a letter of support and say, this is under goal A, priority objective 5, and here it is. And then there's a couple of sentences about why it's important to your region. But obviously that reference helps them make their case also. And so demonstrating or showing like, here's how we can confirm or show the community support for this idea that you have and how this fits into the context of our community and why it benefits our community, what you want to do. That's just seems like that's one thing that we would have to offer, but I agree with Frank. A lot of times they've got resources we don't have access to.
Yeah, I just got to jump in and tell you, Kristin, that's exactly the approach is the approach. We engaged with them on our SEDS, and Bay Mills Indian community kind of wasn't as engaged. And then about 4 years ago, they literally flooded us with projects to put in the SEDS. And some of them weren't traditional EDA projects, but we ended up just creating a whole separate list of their priorities, whether it was an EDA priority or not, because we don't really turn any projects away. But that really opened the door, because we had worked with them a little bit in the past, but that opened the door for them in terms of like how we could work together and support.
I certainly agree with that. I know that I was fortunate with Oneida here when I was looking at a project, and we had not done a SEDS in Oneida, but yet the EDD within our region had a SEDS, and they had just a smidgen there, but that helped us to get access to EDA funding for a feasibility study. So remember that as EDDs, you have a lot of knowledge that you can bring to the equation. And so build up that value of knowledge that you have, because that's where everything starts. Okay, Dion, how are we looking on time then? I don't want to let the class out early.
Well, I'm less concerned about that, and I just want to ask the chat, or excuse me, the audience, if anyone has any additional questions that they'd like to ask, you can feel free to just come off mute or toss them in the chat. But in the meantime, I'll ask the panelists if you have any concluding thoughts today, anything that you were burning to get to that we totally missed. If not, that's absolutely okay, but feel free to add anything that you would like.
Yeah, Jeff, what was the Mills Act that you were going to mention?
Oh, so a couple things at Bay Mills Indian Community. They were recently awarded a $17 million solar energy project to really become energy independent in the region. So like I said, they've been super active, super aggressive. And the most recent one last week, they were announced as an awardee of a $2.5 million EDA grant for our wastewater treatment system that will serve their casino expansion and renovation project. So just two really big projects, I think, for them. And it all ties back to the strategic plan that they did under an EDA grant. And we've seen that success in other organizations, tribal and non-tribal, that when they do that strategic plan, that becomes the playbook. And, you know, they've found a lot of success in doing that. So kudos to them.
Thank you so much. That's a great example. Anybody else? Yeah, so I think in recapping this, as diverse as tribes are, so EDDs are also in that sense, because you're working with different regions, with different entities within the region. But one thing that EDDs have is a tremendous amount of knowledge and contact, both local, statewide, and national. And I think that that's an incredible value that you can bring to the tribes and to nations, is having that contact and the conduit and keeping them abreast of what's happening in the area. So I'll turn it back to Dion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joanie, for moderating our panel. And I want to thank our three panelists as well for their time this afternoon. If you have any additional questions, you can go ahead and reply to the email that we send out when we send the slides at the conclusion of this webinar, and we'll go ahead and get you connected to the right person. So thanks to the audience for being here this afternoon. Thanks again to the panel, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks very much. This was great. I learned a lot from everybody. So thanks for